Tuesday, May 19th has arrived carrying her quiet miracle in open hands. She did not ask whether we deserved another sunrise. She simply came, golden, tender, breathing possibility into weary hearts and tired bones. And yet, how often do we wake without wonder? How often do we rush past the sacred gift of being alive, as though tomorrow signed a contract promising to meet us again? Today asks us a holy question. Are we taking this brand new day for granted? Somebody somewhere prayed for the morning we almost ignored. Someone fought through the dark just to hear birds sing again. Someone begged heaven for one more chance, one more embrace, one more breath. And here we stand, wrapped in mercy we did not earn, walking inside blessings we forgot to name. But gratitude has a way of waking the sleeping spirit. Thanksgiving can turn an ordinary Tuesday into holy ground. When we pause long enough to whisper thank you, the heart remembers its rhythm again. The soul stretches toward light again. The spirit rises from its ashes and learns once more how to dance. So today we gather not only to pray for what is missing, but to praise God for what remains. We gather to open our eyes wider, to love deeper, to breathe slower, and to honor this day as the precious gift it truly is. Because this Tuesday is not common. It is not small. It is not disposable. It is another page in the unfinished story of our lives. And with thanksgiving in our mouths and renewed spirits in our hearts, we shall not waste it. There is something mighty about morning, not loud mighty, not thunder and lightning mighty, but quiet mighty, the kind of mighty that slips through curtains before we are ready, the kind that lays soft gold across the floorboards and whispers to every wounded heart, you made it through the night. And child, do not think that is a small thing. There were storms that tried to break you yesterday. There were burdens sitting heavy upon your shoulders like winter coats soaked in rain. There were moments your spirit bent low beneath disappointment, beneath loneliness, beneath prayers that seemed to wander the heavens without answer. Yet somehow, through all the tossing and turning of this world, Tuesday morning still found your name. The sun rose again, and so did you. That alone deserves thanksgiving. Too many people move through life as though dawn owes them something. We slap alarms silent, drag our feet onto cold floors, and grumble about schedules before we have even thanked God for breath. We rush past miracles dressed in ordinary clothes. We call this day just another Tuesday, while heaven calls it mercy. For there is nothing ordinary about waking up. Somebody kissed a loved one goodnight and never got the chance to say good morning. Somebody closed weary eyes praying for one more sunrise and did not live to see it unfold. Somebody would trade every coin in their pocket, every title beside their name, every possession stored away in closets and bank accounts, just to stand where you stand now, with air filling their lungs and possibility waiting at the door. And still we forget. We forget that life itself is holy, not perfect, not easy, not untouched by sorrow, but holy all the same. A brand new day is God saying, I have not finished with you yet. You may feel broken, but the story continues. You may feel tired, but the story continues. You may feel uncertain, but the story continues. Morning is proof that endings are not always final. The earth itself understands this sacred rhythm. Night falls heavy and dark, convincing us that light has disappeared forever, yet every single dawn arrives with stubborn faithfulness. Every morning teaches resurrection without speaking a word. The birds do not hold conferences debating whether the sun will rise. Flowers do not tremble in fear, wondering if spring will return. Creation trusts what humanity forgets, that after darkness, light still comes. And perhaps that is why gratitude matters so deeply. Gratitude opens our eyes, not just to the grand victories we celebrate publicly, but to the quiet gifts we overlook daily. The steady beating of a heart, the taste of warm coffee, a child's laughter tumbling through the hallway, the embrace of someone who stayed, the strength to stand after sorrow tried to bury us. These are not accidents. These are blessings. And blessings unrecognized become miracles wasted. I have learned that people spend so much time chasing what is next that they fail to honor what already is. We say, I will be thankful when, when the money comes, when the healing comes, when the relationship comes, when the doors finally open. But gratitude is not meant to wait at the finish line. Gratitude belongs here, in the middle of unfinished prayers and imperfect circumstances, because a thankful spirit does not deny pain. It simply refuses to let pain have the final word. You can cry and still be grateful. You can struggle and still be grateful. You can carry scars and still thank God for survival. That is the miracle of a renewed spirit. A renewed spirit knows every day carries fresh mercy hidden inside it. Maybe not ease, maybe not answers, but mercy, strength for today, hope for today, bread enough for today. And beloved, today is enough. The world teaches us to hunger endlessly, to measure life by achievements and applause, to believe we are only valuable when we are producing, performing, proving. But the sunrise asks nothing from us before it shines. Morning does not demand perfection before offering light. It simply arrives. That is grace. Grace wakes us before we deserve it. Grace keeps calling our names after failure. Grace hands us another beginning wrapped in 24 fragile hours. And what we do with those hours matters. A new day is not merely something to survive until bedtime. It is sacred space entrusted to us. We can spend it complaining, or we can spend it creating peace. We can spend it wounding others, or we can spend it healing. We can spend it asleep to wonder, or awake to the beauty trembling quietly around us. For beauty is everywhere when the spirit learns how to see. It is in old hands lifted in prayer. It is in children dancing without shame. It is in neighbors helping neighbors. It is in forgiveness offered after deep hurt. It is in weary people finding the courage to try again. Every morning carries the possibility of becoming a better human being than we were yesterday. That is the true gift of a brand new day. Not merely that we exist, but that we are given another chance to love, another chance to speak kindness, another chance to mend what pride tried to destroy, another chance to pursue purpose instead of fear, another chance to become softer where bitterness tried to harden us. Morning is an invitation, and invitations should not be ignored. So when Tuesday arrives, knocking gently against the windows of your life, do not greet it with indifference. Rise with gratitude trembling in your spirit. Stand inside the miracle of your existence. Thank God for the breath you almost forgot was sacred. Look at the sky long enough to remember you are alive. Look at your loved ones long enough to remember they are gifts and not guarantees. Look at yourself long enough to remember you survived things that once convinced you that survival was impossible. And if your heart is weary today, if sorrow has made a home in your chest, if uncertainty follows you like a shadow, still give thanks. Not because life is flawless, but because grace is present, because you are here, because hope still breathes, because somewhere beneath all the noise of this aching world, Tuesday morning is whispering a truth as old as creation itself. You have been given another day, and that, dear heart, is no small miracle. Human beings have a curious way of overlooking miracles once they become familiar. We pray for rain and then complain about the storm. We pray for strength and then curse the struggle that made us stronger. We pray for another day, then spend that day restless, distracted, and blind to the wonder breathing all around us. That is the tragedy of the human spirit. We grow accustomed to blessings so quickly that we stop bowing our heads in gratitude for them. The heart becomes sleepy, not evil, not cruel, just sleepy. And a sleepy spirit can stand in the middle of abundance and still call itself poor. We forget the holiness of ordinary things. We walk past them every day without touching them with reverence. Breath, laughter, friendship, clean water, warm bread, a mother's voice, the steady rhythm of our own heartbeat. These gifts arrive so faithfully that we begin to imagine they belong to us by right instead of mercy. But nothing in this life is guaranteed. Not one sunrise, not one embrace, not one more conversation. Still, we move carelessly through precious moments as though time has promised to wait for us forever. I have seen people spend entire years chasing bigger houses while peace quietly packed its bags and slipped out the back door. I have seen fathers work late into the night to provide for children who only wanted 5 more minutes of their attention. I have seen women stand before mirrors criticizing bodies that carried them faithfully through decades of storms. I have seen healthy people postpone joy until tomorrow while sick people prayed desperately just to see another morning. And somewhere in all this striving, humanity forgets how to kneel before simple blessings. We become collectors of more while failing to treasure what already rests inside our hands. That is why gratitude must be practiced intentionally. Left unattended, the human spirit drifts naturally toward dissatisfaction. The eyes begin searching constantly for what is missing instead of honoring what remains. We compare our lives until joy shrivels beneath the weight of envy. We stare so long at another person's garden that we fail to water our own. Yet blessings are everywhere for those willing to see. There is blessing in waking up while the dawn still stretches herself across the sky like honey poured slowly over the earth. There is blessing in hearing your own name spoken with tenderness. There is blessing in surviving pain that once threatened to bury you. There is blessing in tears because tears mean the heart still feels deeply enough to love. Even sorrow itself can become a blessing when it teaches compassion. The trouble is that many of us have trained ourselves to notice disaster faster than beauty. One criticism can erase 10 compliments. One hardship can blind us to years of mercy. We carry wounds like trophies and overlook grace as though it were common dust gathering in corners. But grace is never common. A child's laughter is not common. The ability to walk is not common. Peaceful sleep is not common. Another chance after failure is not common. These things are sacred, and sacred things deserve attention. I believe life changes when we begin to slow down enough to notice what has always been there. The old woman humming while sweeping her porch at sunrise. The tired nurse still speaking gently to frightened patients. The stranger holding the door open. The friend who remembers your pain without needing reminders. Tiny acts of goodness scattered across ordinary days like stars hidden in daylight. Blessings often arrive quietly. Not every miracle announces itself with thunder. Some miracles whisper. Some sit beside us so faithfully that we stop recognizing them altogether. That is why loss can feel so shocking. Loss removes the veil from our eyes. Suddenly we realize the ordinary thing we ignored was extraordinary all along. A healthy body becomes precious after sickness. Time becomes precious after goodbye. Silence becomes precious after chaos. Love becomes precious after loneliness. Too often we wait until something disappears before calling it a blessing. But wisdom teaches us to cherish things while they are still present, to hold our loved ones as though they are temporary treasures entrusted to us by heaven. To speak kind words before funerals force us to speak them over flowers and caskets. To laugh loudly while the people we love can still hear us. To thank God for ordinary Tuesdays instead of waiting for catastrophe to remind us life is fragile. For life is fragile indeed. Beautifully fragile. Like glass catching sunlight. Like a song fading softly at the end of the night. Like autumn leaves trembling before they fall. And because life is fragile, it should be handled with gratitude. I think sometimes we imagine gratitude as merely polite behavior. A courteous response whispered before meals or written inside thank you cards. But gratitude is much deeper than manners. Gratitude is vision. It is the ability to recognize that life itself is overflowing with gifts, even in seasons touched by grief. A grateful spirit does not ignore hardship. It simply understands hardship is not the only truth present in the room. There can be pain and still beauty. There can be struggle and still mercy. There can be uncertainty and still reasons to give thanks. That kind of gratitude transforms people. It softens sharp hearts. It calms restless minds. It teaches us to stop racing through life long enough to actually live it. For what good is success if we are too distracted to enjoy the people sitting at our tables? What good is wealth if anxiety steals our sleep? What good is achievement if we lose wonder along the way? Wonder matters. Children understand this naturally. They marvel at puddles, butterflies, clouds shaped like dreams. But adults become serious and hurried. We stop looking upward. We stop listening carefully. We stop noticing beauty because responsibility crowds every corner of the mind. Yet somewhere beneath the deadlines and disappointments, the soul still hungers for awe. And gratitude feeds that hunger. When we begin counting blessings instead of burdens, the world shifts. The same morning sun suddenly appears warmer. The same family dinner becomes holy ground. The same breath filling our lungs feels miraculous again. Nothing outside may change immediately, yet everything inside begins to awaken. That is the power of Thanksgiving. It restores sight to spirits that have grown blind from familiarity. So perhaps today is not asking us for more possessions, more applause, or more control. Perhaps today is simply asking us to notice. Notice the people who love you. Notice the strength that carried you this far. Notice the grace that protected you when you did not even recognize the danger. Notice the breath moving gently in and out of your body this very moment. And above all, notice that life, despite all its hardships, is still a gift. Not because it is perfect, but because it is precious. A blessing overlooked remains a blessing still, but a blessing recognized has the power to transform the soul. So let us not sleepwalk through another sunrise. Let us not rush past miracles disguised as ordinary moments. Let us not wait for loss to teach us what gratitude could have taught us gently. For every heartbeat is a mercy. Every morning is grace. And every new day is heaven whispering once again, look closely. You are surrounded by blessings. There is a quiet revolution that begins the moment a human being learns how to say thank you and truly mean it. Not the hurried thank you tossed carelessly over a shoulder like loose coins. Not the polite thank you trained into us by manners and custom, but the deep thank you, the trembling thank you, the kind born in the marrow of the soul after life has bruised you and blessed you all at once. That kind of thanksgiving changes the heart. For gratitude is not merely a response to goodness, it is a way of seeing the world. Two people can stand beneath the same sky, breathe the same air, walk through the same storm, and yet one will drown in bitterness while the other rises shining with hope. The difference is often gratitude. A thankful spirit learns how to find light even when darkness speaks loudly. I have known people who possessed riches enough to purchase comfort for generations, yet they moved through life starving for joy. Every blessing lost its sweetness because their eyes remained fixed on what they did not have. More money, more recognition, more applause, more control. Their lives became endless hunger wrapped in expensive clothing. And I have known people with little to their names who carried peace like music inside their bones. They laughed deeply. They loved openly. They treated ordinary mornings like celebrations. They understood something the world often forgets, that gratitude turns what we have into enough. Not always abundance, not always ease, but enough. Enough strength for today, enough mercy for today, enough hope to keep walking one more mile. Thanksgiving changes the heart because it shifts our attention. Fear shrinks when gratitude grows. Anxiety loses some of its power when the soul pauses long enough to count blessings instead of burdens. A grateful person may still feel pain, but pain no longer becomes the entire story. That is important, because suffering has a way of narrowing vision. Trouble can pull our eyes toward darkness until we forget light ever existed. Grief can sit upon the chest so heavily that joy feels almost offensive. Heartbreak can make the world appear colorless. Yet gratitude gently lifts the chin, not denying sorrow, not pretending wounds do not ache, but reminding us there is still goodness breathing beside the pain. A mother fighting illness still finds strength to smile at her child's laughter. A weary worker still notices the beauty of evening rain against the windows. A grieving soul still whispers thanks for memories love left behind. This is not weakness. This is spiritual courage. The courage to praise while healing. The courage to trust while uncertain. The courage to remain tender in a world that often rewards hardness. For bitterness hardens people. You can see it in their eyes sometimes. Life disappoints them, wounds them, betrays them, and instead of healing, they begin building walls. Their laughter becomes thin. Their compassion dries like rivers beneath relentless heat. They stop expecting goodness. They stop believing in beauty. They stop giving thanks because pain convinced them gratitude was foolish. But thanksgiving keeps the heart alive. A thankful spirit remains open to wonder, and wonder is holy. Wonder notices the sunrise painting gold across tired streets. Wonder hears music and children playing outside. Wonder feels humbled by the simple miracle of another breath entering the lungs. Wonder understands that life itself, despite its suffering, is astonishing. When thanksgiving enters the heart, resentment begins to loosen its grip. Envy starts losing its poison. Pride bends low enough to recognize dependence upon grace. Gratitude teaches us we are not self-made creatures marching alone through this world. We survived because countless mercies carried us when our own strength could not. Somebody prayed for us. Somebody forgave us. Somebody comforted us. Somebody stayed beside us when storms came roaring. No life is built alone. And Thanksgiving remembers that. It remembers teachers who spoke life into uncertain children, friends who answered late-night tears with patience, grandmothers whose prayers covered generations, strangers whose kindness arrived exactly when needed most. Gratitude softens the ego by reminding us we are deeply connected to one another. That is why thankful people often become generous people. Once the heart recognizes how much it has received, it naturally desires to give. Love multiplies through gratitude. Compassion multiplies through gratitude. Mercy multiplies through gratitude. A thankful person becomes a shelter for others. Not perfect, not untouched by struggle, but warm. Warm like lamplight in a dark window. Warm like soup shared on cold evenings. Warm like hands reaching for another human being and saying, "You do not have to carry this alone." Thanksgiving changes the atmosphere around a person. Complaining drains rooms of peace. Constant negativity spreads like smoke, choking joy from the air. But gratitude brings life. It reminds weary people that beauty still exists. It reminds frightened people that hope is not dead. I believe some hearts remain alive solely because somebody nearby chose gratitude instead of despair. And perhaps that is why Thanksgiving is sacred. Not because life is always easy enough to deserve praise, but because gratitude protects the soul from becoming consumed by darkness. A grateful spirit cannot be easily conquered. Disappointed? Yes. Wounded? Certainly. But destroyed? No, because gratitude roots itself deeper than circumstance. It says, even here there is mercy. It says, even now God is still present. It says, even after all I have suffered, I refuse to stop seeing beauty. That refusal is powerful, especially in a world that profits from dissatisfaction. Every advertisement whispers that we are incomplete. Every comparison tempts us toward envy. Every disappointment invites cynicism. But gratitude rebels against all of it. Gratitude says, I will not spend my life chasing emptiness while miracles sit neglected at my feet. And miracles do sit at our feet every day. The ability to love. The ability to forgive. The ability to begin again after failure. The ability to rise each morning with another opportunity to grow wiser and kinder than before. Thanksgiving awakens us to these treasures. It also renews the spirit in ways success never can. Achievement may impress the world, but gratitude heals the soul. You can possess trophies and still feel hollow. You can gain applause and still lie awake restless at night. But a thankful heart carries peace independent of circumstance. Peace not because every prayer has been answered. Peace not because every dream has arrived. Peace because gratitude teaches trust. Trust that this moment matters. Trust that life still holds beauty. Trust that grace continues working quietly even when we cannot yet see the outcome. And beloved, that trust can carry a person through unbearable seasons. So if your heart feels heavy today, begin with thanksgiving, not because your troubles are small, but because gratitude reminds you your blessings are still greater. Thank God for what remains instead of mourning only what was lost. Thank Him for breath, for survival, for lessons learned through tears, for people who stayed faithful, for the strength to stand one more day. You may discover something miraculous happens inside you. The fear may not vanish immediately. The pain may not disappear overnight. But your heart will begin to change. Slowly, tenderly, like flowers turning towards sunlight after endless rain. For Thanksgiving does not merely change circumstances. It changes us. And a changed heart can survive almost anything. There comes a moment in every human life when the weight becomes too honest to deny. Not the kind of weight that can be lifted with sleep. Not the kind that fades with distraction or noise. But the kind that settles deep inside the bones and says you cannot carry this alone anymore. And it is in that sacred breaking point where pride finally loosens its grip and exhaustion finally tells the truth, that a renewed spirit begins to form. Surrender is not a word the world teaches us to love. The world applauds control. It praises the strong hands that grip tightly, the minds that plan endlessly, the hearts that refuse to bend. We are told to push harder, hold longer, endure silently, and never show the trembling beneath our confidence. The world calls surrender weakness, as though letting go were the same as giving up. But there is a deeper wisdom the soul learns in its own time. Surrender is not defeat. Surrender is release. And release is where renewal begins. For a spirit cannot be renewed while it is clenched in fear, bound by control, or exhausted by the impossible task of carrying everything at once. There is only so much a human heart can hold before it begins to fracture under the pressure of trying to be everything for everyone, fixing what is beyond repair, and controlling what was never ours to command. And so life, in its mysterious mercy, begins to whisper to us through fatigue. It whispers through sleepless nights when thoughts refuse to settle. It whispers through tears that come without permission. It whispers through doors that close no matter how hard we push them open. It whispers through disappointments that strip away our illusions of control until finally, if we are willing to listen, the whisper becomes an invitation. Let go. Not because nothing matters, but because not everything belongs to you. There is a sacred truth hidden inside surrender. It teaches us the limits of our human strength without diminishing our worth. It says you are not weak for being tired. You are not failing for being unable to fix everything. You are human, and in that humanity, grace begins to enter. A renewed spirit is not born from perfection. It is born from honesty. The honesty that says, I cannot do this alone. The honesty that bows before the mystery of life and admits that control was always an illusion we clung to because fear made us believe we were safer that way. But safety built on control is fragile. It shatters easily under the weight of uncertainty. Surrender, however, builds something different. It builds trust where anxiety once lived. It builds peace where resistance once raged. It builds softness where hardness once protected a wounded heart. I have seen people fight life with clenched fists for so long that their own strength became their suffering. They held on to old pain because letting go felt like forgetting. They held on to bitterness because forgiveness felt like losing. They held on to fear because trust felt too vulnerable. But what they did not realize is that holding on can become its own prison. A spirit cannot breathe inside tightly closed hands. It needs space. It needs openness. It needs the courage to release what has been exhausting it. And that release is surrender. There is a kind of sacred exhaustion that leads a soul to transformation. It is not the exhaustion of laziness, but the exhaustion of trying to be everything except at peace. When a person finally grows weary enough of pretending, performing, and controlling, something beautiful begins to happen. The ego softens, the heart opens, the soul becomes willing to receive help beyond itself. That is the beginning of renewal. For renewal does not come from adding more strength to an already burdened spirit. It comes from laying the burden down. It comes from admitting this is too heavy for me, and trusting that life, God, grace, whatever name one gives to the divine mystery, can hold what we cannot. Surrender is deeply personal. It often happens quietly, in places no one sees. A kitchen table at midnight. A car parked outside an empty house. A bedroom filled with silent prayers. A heart speaking words it never thought it would say. I give this to you now. And in that moment, something shifts. Not always outwardly at first, but inwardly, unmistakably. The mind loosens its frantic grip. The breath becomes less shallow. The chest feels a little less tight. The spirit, long burdened, begins to remember what rest feels like. This is what renewal looks like at its beginning. Not fireworks, not sudden perfection, but a soft returning. A returning to trust. A returning to peace, a returning to something deeper than fear. Surrender teaches us that we are not the authors of every outcome. We are participants in a larger unfolding, one we do not always understand but are still invited to trust. And trust, though difficult, is what allows life to move again where stagnation once lived. A surrendered heart does not stop caring. It simply stops trying to control what only grace can shape. It still loves deeply, but without desperation. It still hopes, but without panic. It still works, but without the illusion that everything depends on its own strength. That is freedom. And freedom is the soil where renewal grows. When a person finally surrenders, they often discover something surprising. Life does not collapse without their constant control. In fact, life often begins to flow more gently. Doors open that force could never open. Peace enters where struggle once dominated. Clarity arrives where confusion once ruled. Not because life becomes perfect, but because the heart becomes open. And openness is where healing begins. There is courage and surrender that the world rarely celebrates. It takes more strength to release what you cannot control than to grip it tightly while breaking inside. It takes more faith to say, I trust the process, than to demand immediate answers. It takes more humility to kneel in uncertainty than to stand in exhausted pride. But those who learn this courage discover something sacred. They discover that they are not alone. Surrender becomes the doorway through which grace enters fully into human experience. It is the moment when striving ends and receiving begins. When forcing ends and flowing begins, when resistance ends and rest begins. And in that rest, the spirit is renewed, not made new by effort, but made new by letting go. So if your heart is heavy today, if your mind is overwhelmed by what you cannot fix, if your hands are tired from holding on too tightly to outcomes that refuse to obey your will, consider this gentle invitation. Release it, not in despair, but in trust. Lay it down not as defeat, but as wisdom. For a renewed spirit does not begin where control is strongest. It begins where surrender is finally allowed. There is a quiet danger that slips into human life wearing the ordinary clothes of habit. It does not announce itself with storms or sirens. It does not break doors or shatter windows. It simply arrives soft-footed and steady, until one day a person wakes up and realizes they have been living the same hour repeated across many years. Routine has a way of convincing the soul that it is safe. Wake up, work, return, sleep, repeat. And somewhere inside that repetition, purpose can begin to fade like ink left too long beneath the sun. Now, routine itself is not an enemy. Routine can be a rhythm, a structure, a helpful frame for a disciplined life. But when routine becomes the master instead of the servant, when it replaces wonder instead of supporting it, when it numbs the heart instead of nurturing it, then the spirit begins to lose its voice. And a voiceless spirit is a weary thing. It walks through days but no longer feels them. It completes tasks but no longer questions meaning. It survives, but it does not fully live. Purpose, on the other hand, is something altogether different. Purpose is fire without chaos. It is direction without desperation. It is the steady knowing that your life is meant to echo beyond the boundaries of your own survival. When a person chooses purpose over routine, something sacred begins to stir within them. They stop asking only, what must I do today, and begin asking, why does this day matter? That question alone can change the architecture of a life. For many people move through existence as though they are passengers on a train that never stops long enough for them to choose a destination. They board because it is time. They sit because there is nowhere else to go. They look out the window at passing scenery, but rarely step outside to touch the earth beneath their feet. But purpose calls a person off that train. It says you are not only meant to move through life, you are meant to shape it. There is something deeply human about the longing for meaning. Even those who deny it feel its absence in quiet ways, a restlessness that no amount of entertainment can fully silence, a question that returns in the silence of night. A subtle ache that says, is this all there is? Routine tries to answer that ache with distraction. More tasks, more scrolling, more noise, more schedules filled until there is no room left for reflection. But distraction is not healing, it is delay. Purpose, however, does not distract the soul. It awakens it. A purposeful life does not necessarily mean a life filled with grand achievements or public recognition. That is the world's misunderstanding. Purpose is not always loud. It is often found in the quiet integrity of small, faithful acts. A teacher standing in front of students and choosing patience instead of frustration. A mother preparing food with love even when her hands are tired. A worker choosing honesty when dishonesty would be easier. A neighbor offering kindness without expecting reward. A young person deciding to rise after failure instead of surrendering to shame. These are not small things in the eyes of the spirit. They are acts of alignment. Alignment between who you are and who you are becoming. Routine says, just get through the day. Purpose says, grow through the day. Routine says, do what is expected. Purpose says, do what is meaningful. Routine can keep a person alive, but purpose teaches them how to live with intention. And intention is the difference between existing and becoming. There are people who spend years doing everything correctly according to routine, yet feel deeply misaligned inside. They wake up on time, fulfill responsibilities, meet obligations, and still feel a quiet emptiness that follows them like a shadow. Not because they are failing at life, but because they are not fully participating in it. Purpose calls them back. It asks them to remember the dreams they buried under practicality. It asks them to listen again to the quiet voice they once ignored in favor of safety. It asks them to consider that life might be asking more from them than repetition. But choosing purpose is not always easy. It often requires courage to step beyond what is familiar. Routine feels safe because it is predictable. Purpose feels uncertain because it demands faith. Faith that your life matters beyond what you can see immediately. Faith that your gifts are not accidental. Faith that your presence carries meaning even when the world does not yet recognize it. And faith, though fragile at times, is what gives human beings the strength to move beyond limitation. When a person begins to choose purpose, even in small ways, something begins to shift inside them. The same tasks no longer feel empty because they are now infused with intention. The same conversations become opportunities for kindness. The same challenges become opportunities for growth rather than sources of complaint. Purpose transforms perception. The world does not necessarily change, but the way a person stands within it does. And that change is profound, because when you begin to live with purpose, you begin to understand that your life is not accidental noise in a crowded world. It is a note in a larger symphony. It may be quiet at times, but it is essential. Without it, something would be missing from the music of existence. This awareness brings dignity to ordinary days. Even washing dishes becomes an act of care. Even commuting becomes a moment of reflection. Even working becomes participation in something larger than self. Purpose does not remove responsibility, it redefines it. It turns obligation into meaning. It turns repetition into rhythm. It turns survival into contribution. And contribution is where fulfillment begins to bloom. For human beings are not only designed to consume life, but to contribute to it, to leave behind something that makes the world softer, kinder, wiser, more bearable for those who come after. But routine, when unchecked, can cause us to forget that we are contributors. It reduces life to maintenance rather than creation. Purpose restores creation. It reminds a person that they are capable of impact, even in ways they may never fully see. A kind word spoken today may echo in another person's heart for years. A choice made in integrity may shift the direction of an entire family line. A moment of courage may open doors that outlive the one who walked through them. This is the quiet power of purposeful living. It does not always seek recognition. It does not always demand applause, but it leaves traces of light wherever it goes. And perhaps that is what the world is truly hungry for. Not more people going through motions, but more people living with meaning behind their motions. So the invitation today is gentle but firm. Do not let your life become only routine. Let it become intention. Let it become awareness. Let it become purpose. For routine will keep you moving, but purpose will tell you why you are moving at all. And when a human being finally discovers their why, even the simplest day becomes sacred ground. Hope is a strange kind of strength. It does not always shout. It does not always stand tall in the center of the room demanding attention. More often, hope is quiet. It sits in the corner of the human heart, sometimes bruised, sometimes trembling, but still present, refusing to leave entirely. And yet without hope, a person cannot truly walk into a new day. They may move their feet, they may follow schedules, they may fulfill obligations, but inwardly they remain standing still in the shadow of what has already hurt them. To walk into Tuesday with hope is not to pretend that Monday did not wound you. It is not to deny that yesterday carried its own burdens, disappointments, and unanswered questions. It is instead the courageous decision to believe that yesterday does not own tomorrow. That is a sacred kind of courage. For many people rise each morning carrying invisible weight. Some carry grief that has no words. Some carry financial strain that tightens the chest with every passing hour. Some carry loneliness that sits beside them even in crowded rooms. Some carry memories that still ache like open wounds that time has not fully closed. And yet, despite all of this, Tuesday still arrives, not asking permission, not waiting for readiness, simply arriving as days always do, with a quiet insistence that life continues whether we feel prepared or not. Hope is what allows a person to meet that continuation without collapsing beneath it. But hope is not naive. It is not blind optimism that ignores reality. True hope has seen enough of life to know that pain is real, disappointment is real, failure is real. And still, after all that seeing, it chooses to believe in possibility. That is why hope is not weakness. Hope is endurance with imagination. It says, I have been hurt, but I am not finished. It says, I have lost, but I am not defined by loss. It says, I do not yet see the answer, but I will keep walking anyway. And walking is important because hope is not a stationary feeling. It is a movement of the soul. It is what lifts the foot when discouragement says stay down. It is what opens the eyes when despair says close them. It is what pushes the heart forward when fear whispers turn back. To walk into Tuesday with hope is to make a decision that your story is still unfolding. There are people who become emotionally trapped in earlier chapters of their lives. They live physically in the present, but mentally remain anchored in old pain. A betrayal from years ago still dictates how they trust today. A failure from the past still whispers into their present decisions. A loss from long ago still colors every new beginning with suspicion. But hope gently interrupts that pattern. It says you are allowed to begin again, not because the past did not matter, but because it does not get to decide everything that follows. And this is where hope becomes deeply spiritual. It is the quiet belief that life is not random chaos without meaning, but a river that still carries purpose even when its waters appear dark. Hope does not always understand the direction of the river, but it trusts that movement itself is part of healing. So a hopeful heart steps into Tuesday differently. It does not demand that the day be perfect. It simply asks that the day be possible. And possibility is enough, because within possibility lies every unspoken miracle that has not yet revealed itself. Within possibility lies reconciliation, unexpected kindness, sudden clarity, quiet breakthroughs, and the gentle softening of what once felt unchangeable. Hope is what allows a person to remain open to these things. Without hope, the heart closes like a door locked from the inside. It expects disappointment, so it prepares for disappointment. It anticipates failure, so it stops reaching. It remembers pain, so it avoids love. And slowly, without even noticing, the soul becomes smaller than it was created to be. But hope expands the soul again. It reminds a person that life is still larger than their current struggle, that the sky above their pain is wider than the walls around their worry, that there are still paths they have not walked, still doors they have not opened, still versions of themselves they have not yet become. And that reminder is powerful, because human beings are shaped not only by what they endure, but by what they believe is still possible for them. To walk into Tuesday with hope is to refuse emotional imprisonment by yesterday. It is to say, I will not let one chapter define the entire book. It is to acknowledge the truth of what has happened, but also to honor the truth of what might still happen. There is a dignity in that choice, a quiet dignity that does not depend on circumstances changing immediately. A dignity that stands even in uncertainty, a dignity that says, even if I do not yet see the outcome, I will still choose to believe that goodness is not finished with me. And this dignity often becomes a source of strength for others, because hope is contagious in its own gentle way. One person choosing to rise can inspire another to rise. One person choosing to believe again can soften the despair of someone standing nearby. One person choosing to walk forward can remind another that movement is still possible. This is how hope spreads, not through force, but through presence. And sometimes hope must begin very small, not as a roaring certainty, but as a whisper. I will try again. I will not give up today. I will take one more step. These small declarations are not insignificant. They are the foundation upon which larger strength is built, for no one leaps into hope fully formed. Hope is often practiced in fragments, in moments, in decisions made quietly when no one is watching. And Tuesday, like every new day, offers those moments. It does not require perfection. It only asks for participation. Participation in life again. Participation in possibility again. Participation in your own becoming again. Even when the heart is tired. Even when answers are delayed. Even when clarity has not yet arrived. Hope still says, come anyway. And so walking into Tuesday becomes less about having everything figured out and more about choosing not to abandon the journey. It is the soul saying, I am still here. It is the breath saying, I am still willing. It is the spirit saying, there is still more ahead than what is behind. And that belief, fragile as it may sometimes feel, is enough to carry a human being through the weight of another day. Because hope does not promise that Tuesday will be easy. It promises something far more profound. It promises that Tuesday is not the end of your story.